So, you want to play Victoria 3. You want to see what it's like to live in the Victorian era. Want to guide history your way. Want to change things up. Maybe do some spicy old history. Well, dear viewer, you've come to the right place. Hey guys, Colonel Strat, the strategy extraordinaire here, and I'm going to show you in this guide how to play effectively in Victoria 3 and how to get the most out of your country and dominate in Victoria 3. Now, a common misconception to Victoria and all Paradox games is that they're solely military games. Well, military is a big part of it, but certain Paradox games like Victoria or Crusader Kings or even Hearts of Iron have a lot more delicate mechanics involved in the game. So, in Victoria, that delicate mechanic is the economy. Now, I didn't play Victoria 2. I know. Crucify me in the comments. I know. I wasn't Victoria 2 Chad back in the day, but I liked the concept, and I was on the fence because I had gotten into Paradox games with Hearts of Iron, to be honest, and I had seen the mass amount of replayability with all the countries you can select. In every Paradox game, there's a great deal of countries you can select to start at. And there's no borders, no boundaries. There are some countries that are labeled as unplayable, but eventually DLC for Paradox games will unlock those countries as well. Victoria 3 is the newest Paradox game that has been released by them as a successor to Victoria 2. Now, some Victoria 2 guys are unhappy about certain aspects of the game, and I can feel their concerns, especially the war system. But we'll get into that more in the meat of this video. So I'm going to start as Prussia here on a standard game mode. So the main part of Victoria 3 isn't the army. The main part that it revolves around is your economy. Now, what I mean by that, I mean three things. I mean managing your buildings, making sure you're producing stuff, making sure that you have enough finances to keep your country afloat and to keep your citizens happy by increasing their standard of living so that you don't get a lot of radicals and more loyalists. Now, this can look very intimidating to the average player. There's a lot of menus, there's a lot of different mechanics that can be very confusing, especially the market screen here. It can be very confusing early on. But for Victoria 3 and all other Paradox games, it's imperative to know how to start. Because if you start wrong, you could end up with a failing economy and a radical revolutionary problem that could cause you to lose the game. So, a good way to start as any nation is starting with your research. Now, again, I can't stress this enough that Victoria 3 is an economic simulator, not a war simulator. It's more heavily focused on the economic side. So, while there are military technologies, I usually try to focus on production or society for production to increase the amount of resources you can make and sell to other factions and nations, or society to increase the standard of living for your citizens so that they're happier, and then you can pass laws better. So one of the first texts I go for is one of these ones, because they help cut down on production costs or produce things better. I usually go for nitroglycerin because it really helps your mine output but it depends on what nation you start as. See, starting as Prussia, I have access to a lot of mines, iron mines, coal mines, lead mines. You have to build these up, sulfur mines, but you'll get a lot out of it. So now to look at what you start with, your budget is really small. You don't want to try to go under this budget too much. Now you do have a gold reserve here, so if this runs to 0, then you'll go into the negative and start taking out loans. And then if your country goes bankrupt, that's a huge blow to your population, and then you lose the game. So to balance the economy in the early game, I usually add consumption taxes. Now, this costs something called authority, which helps you pass laws, or kind of like an emergency bill to create funds for the economy. So you never want to do a grain tax or anything that's like a basic need, because it'll just create more radicals. But luxury needs like this, wine, luxury furniture, or glass, luxury clothes, that one's perfectly fine. Services, even though services are considered a basic need, the game says it's okay for them to be taxed. It doesn't make sense to me, but this is the best one to get a consumption tax, and already our budget is up. Budget is up already, and we'll want to keep our taxes at the same and wages at the same, not want to mess with them. We could add more consumption taxes to increase it, and I usually add a few more, like porcelain and furniture. That way we use them of the max amount of our authority, and we get the max amount of budget. So we're pulling that in right now. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to expand our construction capability. Now, construction sectors are the best thing to build early on, because you need more construction sectors to build things faster. So it's always good to put them in a place where there's not any other ones. So like Brandenburg and Rhineland, they already have one. So I try to spread them out. Put one in Prussia and Anhalt, one in Silesia, and then that's it, because our money's already going down. It's going to cost money to build them. Now after those get built, what I like to do is, for the rural development sectors, I like to put them on auto build, auto expand. Now this is important because you want to try to control your buildings to build up a good economy. Now if this bar here goes up to full, they'll auto expand if you have it clicked. And then they'll make more money, employ more workers, increase the standard of living. You'll want to industrialize, because it's all about the Industrial Revolution. But you can't industrialize if you don't have any backbone. So if your backbone is weak, which Prussia's backbone is not weak, so you should, as any European power, go right into building factories and industrialize, so that you can get better jobs for your citizens. Now, another key thing, we're almost done in the start. Another key thing about Victoria 3, when you start, is to look at this button right here, the current situations. Now you have diplomatic problems here, so you'll want to identify the state, and it's a simple fix for that, and begin improving relations, which will cost of influence here. Now, influence is your diplomatic power, so there are a lot of different diplomatic plays in the game. As most European factions, you'll start already in like a trade union, customs union, which Prussia starts in, or an alliance, full-blown alliance. But as any other faction, you won't have to really deal with this as much. But it is imperative to keep your neighbors happy while you build up your economy before you can build up an army. Because if you build up an army before, like Prussia's army is taking a heavy toll on their economy right now. So they have a decent army, but they can't really field them. And then when you go to war, you have to pay them more. So it doesn't help. And then you can declare more interests. Interests are ways to expand. So if you all the blue areas are places that your nation wants to expand in. So let's say you want to colonize. You can declare an interest over here, or maybe over here, or maybe you just want to expand in Europe next to you. This unlocks diplomatic plays, so you can trade and talk to these factions, and unlocks war plays as well, humiliation or conquers. So that's how you open that up. The tax policy, that's all based on bureaucratic buildings. So it's about time I go into the buildings, the meat of Victoria, because the best way to build up your economy is through the buildings. So like here's the resource buildings, the rural buildings, and the agriculture. Those, I already talked about those. The industries are the most money-making ones that require certain agricultural goods. Like this here requires iron and hardwood to produce these weapons. But it also employs a lot of mechanical type jobs. So these jobs will increase the standard of living of your populace, which basically translates to more industry, better standard of living, happier people. Now, down here in development, you have the conscription centers, which is something you cannot expand, but it expands with your laws expand. And they give you free troops to call on in times of war to bolster your army. It can help you pull out a clutch victory when somebody's advancing a line. And of course, we had the construction sectors. And then the railways, they improve infrastructure, provide transportation, and of course increase employment too. Now, back up to these, into the industrial buildings. Now, industrial buildings are one of them, but they're technically urban buildings. So you have an urban center that grows as you build more of them. And then you do have, these are all the different types of industrial buildings, but you also have government administration, which is where you get your bureaucracy, produces bureaucracy, and increases the taxation policy and capacity for your population in the province. So like you'll see that taxation capacity, what they're using and what they're capable of. You want to always try to expand the bureaucratic buildings alongside the industry. And then you have arts, power plants, all these other things are kind of more services than pure industry. And I will go more in depth with these mechanics, but basically to start your game, you'll want to balance your economy, and then set all your. I usually set all my resource buildings on auto, and then build up industries as they get more in. And you can keep an eye on your market to see what your balance is for every certain resource. So if you have like a big surplus of a resource, it's time to build a factory to use it. Like right here, hardwood. It's time for me to build something that uses hardwood, because then I can turn that into a more valuable resource to make more money. And then the expensive goods, you'll want to either import from an outside trader, or build more industries or buildings that produce it to lower the cost, and that will improve your citizens' standard of living. Market access, that has to do with your infrastructure, which is something that you'll want to improve as well. But you can improve that by two ways, either by increasing railroads, which is another luxury resource, or through edicts. So if we go to the political lens, you can go to decrees, road maintenance, and then you can declare this decree, but it costs authority to maintain it, and it'll increase your infrastructure and solve that problem. So let's see, we have a market access in Westphalia. So if we do road maintenance Westphalia, after we start, that'll go away. All right, next things up is the politics window. Now, Victoria 3 is a very political game too, because there's different factions vying to change the laws. So there's 4 tabs here. The overview just it shows you the government, who's in the government, who's the opposition, how popular they are with your population. If they're above 10% or like above 8% or so, they'll pop up here as a potential that can join to your main party, your main government. And then this is how you reform it, and it'll show you what laws you can enact, which ones have enough support to try to pass, and which ones don't have enough support to pass. But it'll show you who supports it and who you want to try to get into power. If they're below 5%, they're considered marginalized, meaning that they're not represented in the government at all. They all have different traits that'll show what they support and what they don't support. And if you can make them happy, they'll give you these buffs, these bonuses. So it is imperative to play the political game and make these different interest groups happy, and in turn they will give you buffs and bonuses, like the Junkers here giving me 10% influence, or the industrialists give me minus production technology costs, which helps me research things faster. And then you have the laws themselves that shows you all the different types of laws, when it comes to rights of women, child labor, free speech, power, distribution of power, government principles, the army, home affairs, the health system. There's so many different laws you could pass, and all the ones that have this icon here means that there are 2 available different types of branching laws with your current government that you can enact with these. So like if I go into colonial affairs here, I can enact these 2, and it gives me a chance for enactment every so often. So it's not going to go over all the time, but this will be like it's putting it on the floor, and people will debate about it, and there's a chance that it'll be enacted that many times, and then that'll compound, and it could take 2 years, could take 3 in-game years, could take more or less, depending on how many, if that chance fires. But you get an increased chance with the more popular you are. And then the last thing is institutions. Institutions are like flat buffs that your government gets due to your bureaucracy, which is the amount of government administration buildings you have. The more bureaucracy you get, the more institutions you can get. And these institutions, like education, gives you more literacy rate, which means you'll be able to have more high-skilled jobs the higher it is. It also helps assimilate the population for cultures who are not your main culture. So it helps, and that helps reduce radicals as well. And then the law enforcement one here reduces state penalties that you get by turmoil. Now, turmoil is when populace is not happy and they're infighting. It also increases a certain political party's strength the higher it goes. So these are one things you're going to want to level, but you can only level them so much. So like, see, it takes 50 weeks for the bureaucrats to enact this. All right, and then the military tab, pretty self-explanatory. When you're attacked, you'll have a general here that can hold so many units. This includes his regular battalions and conscript battalions. So when you conscript them, they'll go to all the generals as well, depending on how many you conscript. You can conscript only a certain region or the whole country at once. And they have different modifiers, different traits that help them. And the Army's pretty self-explanatory. I'll go more into that later in later videos. The Army and Navy. Diplomacy, again, it's more about clear interests and talking about different diplomatic actions you can do, form alliances, and if they have this red arrow, that means they won't accept. There's no way that they'll accept it, and it'll just like increase your infamy, which means more people will dislike you, and you don't want to do that. The cultures tab just shows you what cultures, what faith that the people have here, and like your laws and how that affects how happy they are. It's something to keep an eye on. And then finally here, the population shows you the scale of your upper, middle, and lower class, and what their standard of living is for the average. So you'll want to bump all of these up. Usually, as you bump up the overall standard of living, everyone will bump up. So you'll want to really focus on the lower strata because they cause the most problems because they are the heaviest faction. You see, right here it says 68% are peasants living in subsistence buildings, which means they are not producing anything for the economy and they're not leveling up. So you'll want to, help them the most, and then it'll in turn help the middle and upper because they'll move out of this into the middle and upper. And then there's like different cultures, political strengths of each culture, and you'll want to keep an eye on this just so you can see who's angry and who is getting marginalized, and so you can more pinpoint how to help them. And then last thing, the journal shows it's kind of like your guidelines to each country. It's like their story, their historical story. So German unification, big thing for Prussia. The Americans had the Civil War and slavery, and it's a really big thing to keep an eye on. All these, this just lists who you know, and then you'll want to keep a look on your rank, your prestige. As you get more GDP, which is your gross domestic product, and it shows how much you make and export. It'll show you each. Right here, it shows you the unemployed, peasants, and you'll want to get that number down. When you have the 1 or 4, that's great. The ones that have the biggest amount of unemployed, those are the people you're going to want to focus on with edicts, to decrees, to emergency relief, encourage manufacturing, or encourage industry. All that state actions can incorporate states, or you can change your capital. And then, later on you can establish colonies. There's all these different diplomatic actions. Bankroll. You could choose to bankroll a country to keep them happy. The production lens really shows you where you're producing the most stuff. Again, industry is going to be the biggest thing. Now, Germany starts with a hefty industry, but their resources are kind of lacking, and their industry needs more resources to grow. Military lens is it shows you how many admirals you have, how many generals, and all that. It's pretty basic. Alright, so that's the basic gist of Victoria 3. I will go more in depth on these mechanics in later videos, because there's a whole buttload of mechanics that I just glossed over in this video. But this is the basic gist of how to start. To balance your economy, you have to go into your budget and basically, add a couple of consumptions. This depends on the nation you're playing. Now, I'm playing Prussia. Prussia starts in a very precarious situation where it has more military than it really needs because it doesn't have any starting enemies. Even though Austria is kind of a rival, is a declared rival, so they might try to bully us. But you start with a hefty amount of rural buildings and a little bit of industry already started. So you have your foot in the door. Some nations will have less. Some nations will have more. It all depends on who you're playing. And in the journal, it shows you which way they should go. So how they're going to start, and gives you kind of a way to progress the game going forward. And I will go further into the cultures, the tech, diplomacy, population, all these different graphs and what they mean and how to exploit certain ways. But this is basically how you start the game. You start it by putting a little bit more of a burden on your populace, But in the meantime, you're going to be making enough money to be able to expand your construction and to be able to build more buildings and expand your industries, and that'll create more money, and then later on you can lower those by removing consumption taxes or by passing laws that the populace like. One more piece of advice I'll leave you guys with is don't try to avoid getting any radicals. You're going to get radicals regardless. No matter where you start, you're going to get radicals. Even when you're making fat stacks, people are still going to not like you in the government, but the goal is to have more loyalists than radicals. And just keep an eye on the standard of living. If that keeps going up, then you'll definitely have more loyalists than radicals. So you'll want to try to balance that while expanding your economy so you can have a bigger military, and then trying to colonize certain sections of the world so you can have, access to more resources, like all of these different resources, so you don't have to rely on trade from foreign powers. Again, that's just how I like to play it, but this is basically an overview. And with that, Strat fans, I'll see you in the next one. And in the future, I will start a Let's Play on this game and many other Paradox games. And stay tuned for the next in-depth analysis video for Victoria 3, because there's going to be many more coming after this. Alright, Strat fans, keep it strategic. Colonel out.